On November 9th, 1914, in Douglas County, Missouri, 24-year-old Parrot Brown married 17-year-old Alma Stanley. Alma and Parrot would have at least 5 children together, 4 girls and 1 boy: Mabel, Alva, Ella Mae, Juanita, and Helen. Alma would have her children from the age of 19 to the age of 31. Out of their 5 children, Ella Mae would be the only one to pass away at a young age, and her grave is the one I'm cleaning in this video. Alma and Parrot started their family in Douglas County. In 1920, Parrot was working at a sawmill while Alma was staying home with the children and taking care of the house. Ella Mae was born on July 15, 1922. She passed away on September 1st, 1923, at the age of 1. Her family buried her in Yates Cemetery in Douglas County, Missouri. I found a newspaper article that stated, Parrot Brown of Catoosa, Oklahoma, arrived back last Wednesday in a response to a message that his 13-month-old daughter, Ella Mae, who had been suffering from a complication of diseases since last January, was worse. The little one died Saturday and was laid to rest in Yates on Sunday. I'm guessing Parrot was traveling for work to Oklahoma and the family just hadn't went with him yet. I wasn't surprised to find that Ella had a connection to another grave video I filmed. Thomas Brown, known for having Brown's Cave named after him, would have been Ella's great-grandfather, and she is buried near his grave. After losing Ella Mae in 1930, the whole Brown family moved to Tulsa County, Oklahoma. Parrot was working as a blacksmith in the stone crusher industry. 3 years later, Alma passed away in 1933 at the age of 36. I found a newspaper article that stated she passed away in a local hospital, but I don't know what her cause of death was. Alma is buried in, and I'm not making this name up, Dick Duck Cemetery in Rogers County, Oklahoma. 2 years after Alma passed away in 1935, 44-year-old Parrot married 29-year-old Minnie Hayes. They would have at least 1 daughter together. They stayed in Oklahoma, and on all the censuses, Parrot said he worked as a blacksmith. Parrot passed away in 1961 at the age of 71, and he is buried in Dick Duck Cemetery with Alma. Ella Mae's stone has a dove in flight carved at the top. Doves are a symbol of purity, innocence, and hope, and are very commonly found on the top of children's graves. Her epitaph says, "Gone but not forgotten." My family tree showed that I am related to Ella Mae. She is my 8th cousin, once removed. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Ella Mae. In this video, I'm cleaning the grave of baby Lyle Trail. Like all children who pass away young, Lyle's story was very short, so I'm going to tell his parents' story, and this was not what I was expecting to find. Lyle's parents were Charles Nelson, or Charlie Trail, and Ada, or Daisy Alms. Before Lyle's birth, there isn't much information on his mother, Daisy. I do know she was born in Greene County, Missouri in 1896, and her parents were Fletcher and Emma Beers Alms. Charlie Trail was born in 1894 in Ozark County, Missouri, and his parents were Benjamin and Sarah Mayfield Trail. When Charlie was 6, his father passed away. His mother did remarry and had more children, but I found Charlie on the 1910 census, and he wasn't living with her. He was 15 years old and living with Israel and Nancy Mayfield, his aunt and uncle, and Betty Trail, his grandmother. If those names sound familiar, it's because I already posted a video over his grandmother, Elizabeth or Betty Trail. On September 11, 1915, when Charlie was 21, he married 19-year-old Daisy. After this, the story just gets sad. Daisy and Charlie were only married for 7 months. Charlie passed away on April 3, 1916, at the age of 22. His cause of death was biliary cirrhosis of the liver. Today, this disease is known as primary biliary cholangitis. This is a liver disease that is also considered an autoimmune disease because the body's immune system mistakenly attacks its own cells, which are the bile ducts in the liver. This leads to cirrhosis, which is scarring of the liver, and leads to decreased liver function and eventually death. To this day, the exact cause of this disease is still unknown. Daisy had Charlie buried in Trail Cemetery in Ozark County, Missouri, with his father Benjamin and his grandparents Betty and Asa. His grandparents, Asa and Betty Trail, are who the cemetery is named after. The cemetery sits on land that they homesteaded when they first moved to Ozark County. When Charlie passed away, Daisy was around 5 months pregnant with Lyle. Lyle Claude Trail was born on August 10th, 1916. Lyle passed away on February 8th, 1917, and he was only 5 months old. His cause of death was lobular pneumonia. Daisy buried Lyle in Trail Cemetery next to his father, Charlie. I wish I could say after this life became easier for Daisy, but it didn't. Her next husband's name was Arthur Pigg. Here is the timeline I found on newspapers.com. On August 30th, 1917, Arthur Pigg was in the newspaper concerning his first wife, Sarah. The article stated, Arthur Pigg says his wife, Sarah Pigg, is quarrelsome and accuses him of familiarity with other women and that he cannot live with her. 1 week later, they were in the paper again. Arthur filed for divorce from Sarah. 20 days after the divorce was in the paper, Daisy and Arthur married each other. Daisy and Arthur would have at least 4 children together, and the hardships continued. One article from 1930 stated Daisy had wrote back to her mother saying they had lost a small son, their other children were badly sick, and that Arthur was dangerously ill. From 1932 to 1935, Arthur was the deputy sheriff for Douglas County, and he was in the paper for finding a moonshine still. In 1936, they were in the paper again because their 2-year-old child was seriously ill after drinking a bottle of kerosene. The article stated the bottle was in the kitchen, and while Daisy was outside doing evening chores, the child drank the kerosene, and Daisy found the child strangling and gasping for air. They rushed her to the hospital. I couldn't find any information after this on whether the child lived or not. In 1939, Daisy filed for divorce from Arthur, but she must have changed her mind since it was in the paper for being dismissed. In 1942, the couple lost their son, Frank Pigg. Frank died in action during World War II, and he was believed to be Douglas County's first war fatality. Sometime after this, Daisy and Arthur moved to Klamath County, Oregon. After moving to Oregon, Daisy followed through with divorcing Arthur. I know this because in 1949, Arthur was sentenced to 30 days in jail for failing to comply with alimony payments from a divorce from his wife. Finally, I found Arthur once again in the newspaper in 1954 for being held on a second-degree murder charge in Klamath County. The newspaper described Arthur as a nightclub photographer. Arthur was given his banjo during his jail stay, and the article said, the aging cameraman is staging an almost continuous one-man floor show in the felony section of the county jail. Arthur was arrested because of a love feud with 48-year-old Roy Durham over the affections of Roy's 44-year-old ex-wife. Arthur, who was 73 at the time, was charged with fatally wounding Roy. The article described Arthur as a gray-haired Lothario, stating that he was reported to have been the boyfriend of at least 3 different women, and he was the happiest prisoner in the jail. In the article, Arthur stated, Roy was drunk and fighting mad. He told people he was going to get me. The night of the shooting, I'm sure he intended to kill me. When a 48-year-old man in good health takes after a 73-year-old man, it isn't fair. My gun equalized things. Arthur fought the charge on the grounds of self-defense. He went to trial, and the jury found him not guilty. The next article I found about Arthur was his obituary. Arthur passed away in 1968 at the age of 88, and he is buried in Klamath Memorial Park Cemetery in Klamath County, Oregon. Daisy passed away in 1987 at the age of 91. She is buried in the same cemetery as Arthur, but I don't know if their graves are anywhere near each other. When I went to the cemetery this day, I had originally planned to clean both Lyle and Charlie's graves and do the cleanings in one video, but as you can see, Charlie's stone did break in half and fall over. I did spray Charlie's with D2 because I saw he had a really long epitaph and I wanted to see what it said. The top of Charlie's stone has a really neat design with a star on the top that I had never seen before. It says husband of Daisy Trail and that he was 22 years, 1 month, and 8 days at the time of his passing. His epitaph says, "Dearest husband, we have laid thee in the peaceful grave's embrace, but thy memory shall be cherished till we see thy heavenly face." Lyle's stone says our baby and has a lamb carved on it, which symbolizes the innocence of a child. This story did make me wonder how different Daisy's life would have been if Charlie had lived or if Lyle had lived. She probably would have never left Ozark County. Also, none of her children with Arthur would have been born, leading to none of the grandkids from those kids being born. It would have changed the whole family tree, and that's something interesting to think about. My family tree showed that I am related to Charlie and Lyle. Charlie is my 10th cousin, once removed. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Charlie and Lyle. Robert James Roland was born one day after Valentine's Day on February 15th, 1843 in Simpson County, Kentucky. He was the 9th of 12 children born to Jilson and Sarah Lovell Roland. When Robert was born, both of his parents were 38. In 1860, the Roland family had moved from Kentucky to Pope County, Illinois. His parents made their living farming. In August of 1861, at the age of 18, Robert began his service for the Civil War. He was a private for the 31st Illinois Infantry, Company D for the Union. According to a note left on his family page, Robert enlisted with his name as John Roland, spelled Roland. While in his infantry, he was hospitalized, and his unit didn't know what had become of him, so they reported him AWOL, absent without leave, meaning he wasn't present at his assigned duty location without permission. During his hospital stay, he was admitted under the name John Roland, spelled with the W instead. After the hospital discharged him, he returned to his unit and they had to re-enlist him. Robert served for 3 years and mustered out in March of 1865. It was noted when he mustered out he had a disability on discharge. There was a note that said he had been shot in his left foot during his service. After being discharged, Robert continued using the spelling of Roland with the W in it. It was noted on his page that his descendants are the only ones of Jilson and Sarah that use that different spelling for their last name. 1 year after serving in the war, on October 28, 1866, 23-year-old Robert married 18-year-old Hannah Nelson. Robert and Hannah would have 5 children together, 3 boys and 2 girls, Alonzo, Thomas, Pearl, Otis, and Perda. Hannah would have her children from the age of 21 to 37. On the 1880 census, the couple were in their late 30s and they had moved to Texas County, Missouri. They eventually settled in Wright County, and on all censuses, they were farming for a living while Hannah took care of the house and kids. Robert passed away on August 12, 1892, at the age of 49. I couldn't find any information about his cause of death. There was a very short notice in the paper that said, "Died R.J. Roland of Buckhart on Friday, August 12." His family buried him in Tedrick Cemetery in Douglas County, Missouri. After Robert passed away, Hannah continued to live in Wright County. Her daughter Perda Hackworth and her husband and children moved in with Hannah by 1920. In 1930, Hannah was almost 80 and she was still living with her daughter Perda. Hannah passed away in 1937 at the age of 88. She is buried next to Robert in Tedrick Cemetery. This was one of the stones that I was a bit disappointed when I went back to check. The staining left on the stone is under the surface, so scrubbing will not help it. When I rechecked his stone, I went ahead and sprayed more D2 on it to help get the staining removed that's still left, and I will recheck his stone again in the fall, and hopefully more progress has been made. The top of Robert's stone has a medal with a star at the end of it, which I found out is the medal for GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic. This was a fraternal organization of veterans who had served in the Union Army during the Civil War. Robert's epitaph says, "Father, we miss you here, but hope to meet you in forever." My family tree showed that I am related to Robert. He is my 9th cousin, 4 times removed. Thank you so much for watching. Rest in peace, Robert. Hannah Elizabeth Yates was born on October 17, 1875, in Big O Creek, Arkansas. She was the second of 7 children born to Andrew and Virginia Reed Yates. When Hannah was born, her father was 30 and her mother was 19. When Hannah was a 1-year-old, her family moved from Arkansas to Douglas County, Missouri, and her parents began farming for a living. On December 8, 1892, when Hannah was 16, she married 20-year-old John Driscoll. Hannah and John would have 9 children together, 2 boys and 7 girls. Virginia, Mary, Alfonso, Clona, Verla, Maxine, James, Delphia, and Albertia. Hannah would have her children from the age of 16 to the age of 40. Out of their 9 children, at least 1 would pass away at a young age. Virginia was born in 1893 and passed away in 1896 at the age of 2. I couldn't find any information on where she is buried. One ancestry site says their second child, Mary, passed away at the age of 1, but another site says she lived to be 67, so I don't know which one is correct. My guess is the one that says she lived to be 67 is. Hannah and John lived in Ozark County, and in 1930 they moved to Douglas County. They made their living farming, and Hannah took care of the house and the kids. Hannah passed away on January 4th, 1946, at the age of 75. Hannah's family buried her in Yates Cemetery in Douglas County, Missouri. There are very few Yates buried in this cemetery, so I am guessing that Hannah's family is probably what Yates Cemetery is named for. Her cause of death was chronic interstitial nephritis. This is a chronic kidney condition that causes inflammation and scarring in the kidneys, and it eventually leads to a gradual decline in kidney function. There were 2 other things listed below on her death certificate, but I couldn't make out the handwriting. Like usual, can you let me know in the comments if you have an idea what these say? 4 years after Hannah passed away, I found John on the 1950 census. He was 80 years old and had moved in with his daughter, Clona Driscoll Brown. He stated on the census he was divorced, so he may have remarried after Hannah died, but I couldn't find any sources confirming this. This made me think maybe it was an error on the census. John passed away in 1952 at the age of 82. Like Hannah, John also passed away from chronic kidney problems. He is buried in Yates Cemetery next to Hannah. Hannah and her husband both have conflicting dates and years on several things. Hannah's death certificate and obituary matched each other, but her stone has a different birth year on it. Again, I'm not sure which is correct. My family tree showed that I am related to Hannah. She is my 9th cousin, 3 times removed. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Hannah. Henry Bardmass was born on March 10, 1837, in Perry County, Illinois. He was the 7th of 16 children, born to Peter and Dorcas Keith Bardmass. When Henry was born, his father was 30 and his mother was 28. Henry grew up in Perry County and his parents farmed for a living. Henry's father was another example of a family's last name being spelled differently on several different censuses and sources. The spellings of their name included Bardmass, Bardmess, Portness, and Portmess. In March of 1865, at the age of 28, Henry began his service for the Civil War. He was a private for the 156th Illinois Infantry, Company K for the Union. He served for 6 months and mustered out in September of 1865. 3 years after his service in the war, on June 12, 1868, 31-year-old Henry married 18-year-old Eliza Staten. Henry and Eliza would have 6 children together, 3 boys and 3 girls: Molly, Clarence, Albert, Hayes, Ida Bell, and Martha Luella. Sometime after getting married, Henry and Eliza moved to Douglas County, Missouri. After the move, Henry passed away. He passed on August 26, 1885, at the age of only 48. A relative left a note on his ancestry page that, according to his daughter Martha's family Bible, he passed away due to tuberculosis, also known as consumption. His family buried him in Tedrick Cemetery in Douglas County, Missouri. 8 years after Henry passed away in 1893, 43-year-old Eliza married 52-year-old Joseph Bown. According to an ancestry site, Joseph had also lost his first spouse, and he had 8 children from his first marriage. Joseph and Eliza would have 1 daughter together, Jessie. But Eliza passed away only 4 years after marrying Joseph. She passed away in 1897 at the age of 47. According to the family Bible, she also died of tuberculosis. Eliza is buried next to Henry in Tedrick Cemetery. A fact I did find interesting: after Eliza passed away, Joseph would remarry for a 3rd time, and he would then have 7 children with his next wife. This brought Joseph's total child count to 16. You can see in the video at some point Henry's stone broke in half, and somebody did repair it, so I was sure to check if it was stable before cleaning. The top of Henry's stone has a hand reaching down from clouds holding a chain. This symbolizes the hand of God reaching down to take the soul of the deceased to heaven. The chain represents the deceased person's family being left behind, and if there's a broken link in it, it signifies the family being broken. I didn't notice if any of the links were broke on Henry's stone. This symbol is also associated with a sudden death, life being cut short, and the soul being taken unexpectedly. Henry was only 48 when he died, so this does match his story. His epitaph says, "A little while on earth he spent, till God for him an angel sent." My family tree showed that I'm not related to Henry, but I am related to his wife, Eliza. Eliza is my 8th cousin, 5 times removed. Thank you so much for watching. Rest in peace, Henry. Richard Riley Hicks was born on November 10, 1835 in Clay County, Kentucky. He was the second of 9 children born to James and Rebecca Riley Hicks. When Richard was born, his father was 38 and his mother was 26. In 1850, when Richard was 15, his family had moved from Kentucky to Ozark County, Missouri. Richard was working on his family's farm. In 1854, 18-year-old Richard married 14-year-old Mildred Ann, or Millie, Galding. Millie and Richard would have 4 children together, 3 boys and 1 girl: James Philip, or JP, Rebecca, Robert Samuel, and General Warren. A connection Richard has to a previous video I posted: his son Robert was married to Deborah Matlock Hicks. They're buried in Yates, but Robert and Deborah are on one side, and Richard is more in the middle of the cemetery. I figured they were related to each other, but I didn't realize how close they were. In 1860, Richard and Millie had moved to Douglas County, Missouri, and started their own farm. 1 year later, in July of 1861, at the age of 25, Richard began his service for the Civil War. According to a family page, he enrolled several different times. The first time he enrolled, he was a private in the Douglas County, Missouri Home Guard for the Union. Home Guard units were local militia groups formed to defend their states and communities. They played a major role in maintaining order, protecting locations, and helping in the capture of deserters. He served in the Home Guard unit for 3 months and was discharged in October of 1861. He then enrolled again in August of 1862. He served for the 6th Regiment Company C in the Provisional Enrolled Missouri Militia for the Union. This was a state militia formed to replace the less effective Enrolled Missouri Militia. They were responsible for garrison duty, patrolling, and suppressing guerrilla activity. He was discharged from this service in February of 1863. 7 days after Richard was discharged, his only daughter with Millie, Rebecca, passed away. Rebecca was born in 1857, and she passed away in February of 1863 at the age of only 5. There are no records of her cause of death or where she is buried. There is another military record that says Richard served again from August 1863 to March of 1864, but it doesn't have listed what company he was in. Once again, tragedy struck the family the same month Richard stopped serving. Richard was discharged for the last time on March 1st, and 17 days later, he lost his wife, Millie. Millie passed away on March 18, 1864, at the age of 30. Richard had Millie buried in Yates Cemetery in Douglas County, Missouri. 5 months later, 28-year-old Richard married 18-year-old Mary Perkins. I always get comments from people upset with how quickly men would remarry back in this day. Richard had 3 small boys to take care of, along with a farm and a household to run. Survival was the priority at this time. Men were the primary caretakers of outside chores, while women handled the household and domestic side of things. You have to remember also, marriage was an expectation of society during this time. So, when you became a widow, you were expected to remarry. Richard and Mary would have 13 children together, 7 girls and 6 boys. Julia, John, Margaret, Edwin, Sarah, Alice, Esther, a baby boy that passed away in infancy, Lucetta, Hancock, Richard, Effie, and Roy. Mary would have her children from the age of 19 to 45. Out of their 13 children, 3 would pass away at a young age. In 1881, they would lose an infant boy who was born and passed on April 3rd. After losing their baby, a year later, Lucetta was born in July of 1882. She passed away in 1887 at the age of 4. Hancock Hicks was born and passed away in 1883. According to Find a Grave, Lucetta and the infant boy are buried in Yates Cemetery. There is no record of where Hancock was buried, but I'm pretty sure he is somewhere in Yates Cemetery. All of these children's graves have been lost to time. I wasn't able to find them, and there are no photos of them on Find a Grave. Richard and Mary lived the rest of their lives in Douglas County, raising their family and farming. Richard passed away on December 12, 1914, at the age of 79. His death certificate stated he died due to senility with paralysis. Senility meant Richard had a decline in his physical and mental health due to old age. It's an older term for what we now call dementia. Richard and Mary had been married for 50 years when he passed. His family buried him in Yates Cemetery with his children. Mary didn't live long after Richard passed away. She only lived a little under 4 more years. Mary passed away in 1919 at the age of 73. Her death certificate listed her cause of death as paralysis, but another copy was added. The paralysis was marked out and marked as a mistake, and instead they wrote hemorrhage of the brain due to an arterial abscess. Mary is buried next to Richard in Yates Cemetery. My family tree showed that I am related to Richard. He is my 8th cousin, 5 times removed. Thank you so much for watching. Rest in peace, Richard. Henry Harrison Bell was born on September 29, 1830 in Benton County, Tennessee. Henry was named after his grandfather, Henry Harrison. Henry was the 3rd of 14 children born to James, and I don't know if she pronounced her name Carolyn or Caroline, Harrison Bell. When Henry was born, his father was 29 and his mother was 18. Henry's story was difficult to research since Henry's family search and ancestry pages have very conflicting dates and information that don't match up. For example, according to one page, he divorced his wife Sarah in 1903. There are no sources attached to this to confirm it. According to Find a Grave, Sarah passed away in 1883. So Sarah was getting a divorce 20 years after her death. And even though Sarah was 47 or 48 at the time of her death, this photo is attached to her Find a Grave page. I'm sorry, I know times were very difficult back then, but this is the oldest looking 48-year-old I've ever seen. I really don't believe this is Sarah. It's difficult to wade through all the false information when there's so much of it. Thankfully, Virginia Brown posted a great biography typed up on Henry's Find a Grave page. It's sourced from a book that she wrote about the family titled The Family of James and Carolyn Bell. The first thing Virginia does is she starts calling out one rumor about Henry, that he was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian who walked the Trail of Tears in his youth. He then escaped his fate by hiding in a cave, and he eventually moved to Ozark County, Missouri. They then claimed he lived out his life with several unlawful marriages to white women. Virginia writes, none of this is true. When Henry was 13 in 1843, his family, along with his grandfather Henry, moved from Tennessee to Cooper County, Missouri. 2 years later, in 1845, they left Missouri and moved to Washington County, Arkansas. Henry grew up here, attending school and helping his family on the farm that his father and grandfather had started together. In 1850, 20-year-old Henry was still living with his parents and working on the farm for a job. The year Henry's first marriage happened is unknown. It is guessed it happened between 1850 and 1853. For a while, Henry's first wife's name was unknown. One record was found that shows his first wife's name was listed as Louise Bell, but nothing else is known about her. They did have one son together, John Henry, who was born in November of 1853. Henry then married for a second time. Henry and Sarah Jane Young married in Arkansas in 1861. Henry was 30 and Sarah was 26. Henry and Sarah would have 9 children together, 7 boys and 2 girls. Emmanuel, William, Henrietta, Manford, Irvin, Marion, Alvis, Mary, and Oliver. In 1880, Sarah and Henry were on the census, and they had moved to Ozark County, Missouri. They were still farming for a living. Their last child, Oliver, was born in 1881, and Sarah passed away a few years after this. Sarah died in 1883 at the age of 47 or 48. She is buried in Eaton Cemetery in Ozark County, Missouri. 3 years later, on March 6, 1886, 55-year-old Henry married 18-year-old Frances or Louisa Driscoll. Henry and Louisa would have 3 daughters together, Alzona, Maddie, and Hattie. I checked, and Maddie and Hattie were not twins. Louisa's Find a Grave page had a little paragraph on it that said, Henry and Louisa lived in a large log house near Brixie at the head of Owens Hollow. Their farm was located east of the Brixie General Store and just up the hill from his brother, Malachi. All 3 of their daughters, Zona, Maddie, and Hattie, were born there. Today, all that remains of the old log house is its foundation and a lone rose bush. Henry and Louisa were married for 17 years before divorcing in August of 1903. For some perspective, Louisa was 36 and Henry was 73 during this time. According to Louisa's Find a Grave page, in 1900, Henry and Louisa moved from their log home in Brixie to the little town of Bertha. At this point, Louisa had helped raise Henry's 9 children from his second marriage to Sarah. The youngest child, Oliver, was 20 years old and he had moved out and was working in Springfield, Missouri. This was when their marriage started to deteriorate and Henry had decided he wanted to live alone. Virginia also typed up this little narrative on Louisa's page. Virginia wrote, that cold, bleak winter day on February 13th, 1902, was forever stamped in Louisa's memory. It was the day before Valentine's Day, 1 month before they would celebrate their 16th wedding anniversary. Alzona was 13, Maddie 12, and Hattie 8. Henry forced them to move to another house he had provided and severed all ties to them. She then wrote more later, but Virginia never went back and wrote more. Virginia, don't leave me hanging. What happened after this? After the divorce, within 5 weeks, Louisa had remarried to George Berry. Henry never remarried after the divorce and later moved in with his oldest grandson, James William Bell, the son of his oldest son, John. In the summer of 1921, Henry's health started to go downhill. Henry passed away that fall on October 23, 1921, at the home of his grandson. He was 91 years old. Henry's cause of death was listed as inflammation of the bowels. This is another death certificate I couldn't read. If you know what it says, leave me a comment. I think it says from swallowing, but I can't make out the last two words. Henry is buried in Eaton Cemetery with Sarah. Henry has a simple stone. Notice his name is misspelled. His epitaph says, "Blessed are the pure in heart." This is wrote in someone's cursive handwriting, and as you can see, the word R is misspelled. My family tree showed that I'm not related to Henry, but my husband is. He is my husband's 6th cousin, 6 times removed. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Henry. Riley Samuel Hicks was born on August 16, 1857, in Douglas County, Missouri. He was the first of 7 children born to John and Mary Riley Hicks. When Riley was born, his father was 23 and his mother was 19. In 1870, when Riley was 15, his family had moved to Texas County, Missouri, and they started a farm there. Martha Ann Riley was born in June of 1867 in Douglas County, Missouri. She was the last of 9 children, born to Washington and Louisa Collins Riley. When Martha was born, her father was 45 and her mother was 43. Martha grew up in Douglas County on her parents' farm. At the age of 12, Martha did lose her father. After he passed away, her mother didn't remarry and their family remained in Douglas County. Around 1880, when Riley was 24, he married 26-year-old Sarah Ann or Sally Riley. You may have noticed, like I did, Sally's maiden name is the same as Riley's mother's maiden name. So, were they related? If the Ancestry site links are correct, yes. Sally's dad, Alexander Riley, and Riley's mom, Mary Riley Hicks, were brother and sister, which would have meant Riley and Sally were first cousins. This did make me curious. When did it become illegal to marry your first cousin in Missouri? The answer is 1983, 103 years after Sally and Riley married each other. Sally and Riley would have 2 daughters together, Elizabeth or Lizzie and Pearl. Their daughter Pearl was born in 1889. Sally passed away not long after this. There is no record of where Sally is buried. 1 year after losing Sally, Riley was in the paper with Martha, and they were in trouble. The article dated January 9, 1890 stated, Riley Hicks and Martha Riley were arrested and brought before Squire Lloyd of Jackson Township, Monday the 6th, charged with open and notorious cohabitation. They were proven guilty to the satisfaction of Squire Lloyd, and each were sentenced to 9 months in jail. Open and notorious cohabitation meant that Martha and Riley were living together publicly in an intimate relationship without being married. When Martha and Riley were arrested for living together, Martha was also around 5 months pregnant with their first child, which probably didn't help their case in court. This made me wonder, did Martha give birth to her child in jail? I think the answer is no. I found more newspaper articles, and it seems instead of jail time, they appealed the case. A year later, they were found guilty, and the court fined them a whole $1. Back in 1891, a dollar equaled to around $35 in today's money. So back in this time, marrying your first cousin, no problem. Living with your significant other, but you're not ready to commit to marriage yet, straight to jail. You probably noticed, like I did, that once again, Martha's maiden name is the same as Riley's mother's maiden name. So, once again, were Riley and Martha related? If the Ancestry site links are correct, yes. Martha's dad, Washington Riley, and Riley's mom, Mary Riley Hicks, were brother and sister, which would have meant, once again, Riley and Martha were first cousins. 3 years after their jail time, Martha and Riley finally made it official. On May 14th, 1893, when Riley was 37, he married 25-year-old Martha. Martha and Riley would have 8 children together, 1 boy and 7 girls. Before Riley and Martha were married, they already had 2 children together, a daughter Mary and a son named Sophus. After their marriage, Martha would have 6 more daughters, Laura, Maggie, Florence, Rosie, Lottie, and Ethel. So, including his children from his first wife, Riley had a total of 10 children, 9 girls, and 1 boy. Martha would have her children from the age of 22 to the age of 41, and all 10 of Riley's children with both Sally and Martha would live to adulthood. Martha and Riley lived out their lives in Douglas County, raising their kids and farming for a living. Riley passed away first on March 25th, 1917, at the age of, again, this is a mystery. This is another person I found who has several different birth and death years listed. His death certificate says he was born in 1855 and died in 1917 at the age of 62. Find a Grave says he was born in 1857 and died in 1917, making him 60. His headstone says he was born in 1872 and died in 1915, making him only 43. So, Riley was 62, 60, or 43 when he passed. His death certificate said his cause of death was pneumonia with fever. Martha had Riley buried in Henderson Cemetery in Douglas County, Missouri. After Riley passed away, I found Martha on 2 more censuses. On the 1931, she was around 63, still in Douglas County, in the household of Lando Riley. Her relationship to the head of household was listed as servant. Martha would have been Lando's first cousin. Her father and Lando's father were brothers. I'm not sure if she was living with them and working for them, or if she was just working her day job when the census workers showed up. 10 years later, in 1940, she was still in Douglas County in her own house, and her 2 teenage granddaughters, Alpha and Laura Hicks, were living with her. Martha passed away on February 12, 1946, and once again, I'm not sure of her age. Her death certificate says she was born in 1876 and died in 1946, making her 69 years old. Find a Grave says she was born in 1867 and died in 1946, making her 78. Her headstone says she was born in 1881 and died in 1946, making her 65. So again, she was 69, 78, or 65. I'm not sure. Her cause of death was myocardial degeneration, which simply means her heart started to not function correctly. She also had epilepsy, meaning she was having repeated seizures and they weren't sure what caused them. Martha is buried together with Riley in Henderson Cemetery. Several of their children are also buried here. My family tree showed that I'm not related to Riley or Martha. My husband isn't related to Riley, but he is related to Martha. Martha is his second cousin, 5 times removed. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Riley and Martha. Otis Calvin Sims was born on September 9th, 1898 in Douglas County, Missouri. He was the 6th of 8 children born to Siegel and Susanna Wallace Sims. When Otis was born, his father was 37 and his mother was 33. Otis grew up in Douglas County on his parents' farm. For any Douglas or Ozark County locals who are watching this video, Otis's older brother was Reverend Zim Sims. I know every time Reverend Sims is posted on other history pages, a lot of people say they knew him. He has a lot of stories, and he was a preacher in several churches in Douglas and Ozark County. Reverend Sims is buried in the same cemetery near Otis's grave. In 1910, I found Otis on the census when he would have been around the age of 12. He was attending school and he knew how to read and write. It was also listed he had a job working on his family's farm and he was earning a wage for it. If this is true, this was very unusual to find. Most children in this time had no choice but to help with farm and household chores for survival of the family. This was the first time I found where a child said they were actually getting paid for helping around the farm. It also listed that he worked on the family farm, so he wasn't going to a neighbor's farm for another job. Also on the census living with Otis was his paternal grandmother, Paulie Sims. I've already posted Paulie's cleaning and history video, if that name sounds familiar to you. A year after the census was taken in 1911, the Sims family lost their daughter unexpectedly. Lillian Sims was Otis's older sister. Her story was a sad one, and it reminded me a lot of Minnie Ballinger Bennett. Lillian married her husband, Oscar Pride, when she was only 14 years old. I don't know how old Oscar was at the time of their marriage. It's documented Lillian and Oscar ran a store in Goodville, Missouri. 2 years after their marriage, Lillian passed away due to postpartum preeclampsia, trying to give birth to her only child. This means that after she had her baby, she developed severely high blood pressure, which leads to seizures, strokes, and sadly in Lillian's case, her death. Her obituary didn't say whether the baby lived. Lillian is buried in Clifty Hall Cemetery in Douglas County, Missouri. Fast forward to 7 years later, 3 days after his 20th birthday, Otis filled out his draft card for World War I. He was still working for his father on the family farm. His card says he was of medium height and build with blue eyes and dark brown hair. The next month, Otis left home for training camp in San Antonio, Texas. Otis passed away the next month at his family's home. So I don't know if he became sick en route to the training camp, if he got to the training camp and he got sick so they sent him home. I'm not sure what happened. But Otis passed away on December 8th, 1918 at the age of only 20. Otis had a very long obituary published in the paper, and he was clearly loved by the community. His obituary said, "Again the death angel has entered the vicinity and called from our midst a beloved and highly esteemed young man. Otis was sick only 10 days, but he suffered terribly during that time. He first took influenza, followed by typhoid fever. He was delirious most of the time, but when death came so peaceful, he merely fell asleep. Fell asleep to wake with Jesus. Dearest loved ones, do not weep. He was a good Christian boy and loved by all who knew him. He is gone, but not forgotten. Never shall his memory fade, and sweetest thoughts will ever linger around the grave where he lies. God in his wisdom has recalled the born. His love has given, though the body slumbers here, his soul is safe in heaven." Otis's obituary also stated his family was unable to have a funeral at the time he passed because his whole family was sick with influenza at the time. The Sims buried Otis in Tedrick Cemetery in Douglas County, Missouri, next to his grandma, Paulie Sims. I found an article from the spring of next year that invited everybody to attend Otis's funeral. It said Reverend Shannon and Brown were both going to preach a sermon. Otis was also a member of the Modern Woodsmen of America, and they were placing his monument in that day. Then a basket dinner was to follow. The NWA put a beautiful headstone in for Otis. Otis's stone has the gates of heaven opening carved into the top. The NWA symbol is in the middle with the words life, love, and truth around it. It also has a cloth draped across the top of it, which is a symbol of the person passing from this life into the next. His stone was stained very black, and it still has a lot of staining to it. I reapplied D2 when I visited, and I will check it again later. My family tree showed that I'm not related to Otis, but my husband is. He is my husband's 7th cousin, 4 times removed. Thank you so much for watching. Rest in peace, Otis. Paulie Florence Workman was born on May 29, 1895 in Ozark County, Missouri. She was the youngest of 3 daughters born to Isaac and Sarah Ballinger Workman. When Paulie was born, her father was 27 and her mother was 25. Paulie grew up in Ozark County and her family farmed for a living. The story starts to get interesting when we get into the marriages of the Workman sisters. Paulie and her 2 sisters, Mary and Margaret, would all marry trail men who were also siblings to each other. This is something I've come across in my own family tree, especially when the families were close neighbors. One of the Trail brothers would marry 2 of the Workman sisters. In 1905, Paulie's oldest sister, Mary, who was 15 at the time, married 24-year-old Richard Trail. They would have at least 7 children together. 2 years later, in 1907, Paulie's other sister was married. 14-year-old Margaret married 29-year-old George Trail. George was Richard's older brother. George and Richard's parents were Asa and Betty Davis Trail. In this video, I'm cleaning in Trail Cemetery, which is named after Asa and Betty Trail, and this is also where everyone in this story ends up buried at. I've already posted Betty's cleaning video if you're interested in that, and Asa's will be posted soon. Margaret and George would stay together the rest of their lives and have 7 children. 3 years later, I found Paulie on the 1910 census, and she was 15 years old. She was the last child living with her parents, and it was documented she had not attended school and she didn't know how to read or write. You probably saw this coming. 1 year after the census was taken, Paulie was married. 2 days before her 16th birthday, on May 23, 1911, Paulie married 19-year-old Sheridan ALSUP. They stayed in Ozark County and started their own farm. Paulie and Sheridan would have 4 children together, 2 boys and 2 girls. William, Eldridge, Eunice, and Ella Mae. Fast forward 9 years later to 1920, and tragedy struck 2 of the sisters' families. In March of 1920, Paulie's older sister, Mary, passed away at the age of only 29. She passed away due to pneumonia and influenza. Mary was buried in Trail Cemetery in Ozark County, Missouri. This same year, I don't know the exact date, Paulie also lost her husband, Sheridan. Sheridan was 27 or 28 at the time of his passing. I couldn't find any information about his cause of death, but given his sister-in-law had passed away from the flu, that was my guess on what happened. In 1918, the Spanish flu epidemic started, and in 1920, it was still happening. Sheridan was also buried in Trail Cemetery. 1 year later, Paulie married her sister's widower, Richard. On May 4th, 1921, 25-year-old Paulie married 39-year-old Richard Trail. Paulie and Richard would have 5 children together, 2 girls and 3 boys, Dolly, Bertha, Lloyd, James, and Ralph. Including Paulie and Richard's children from their first marriages, they had a total of 17 children together. I couldn't find any documentation of them losing any babies, so I do think all 17 kids lived well into adulthood, which is an amazing statistic. In the year 1930, Paulie and Richard had moved their family to Wright County, Missouri. It said they were renting a house in Mountain Grove and they had 10 children still living at home with them. Paulie had learned how to read and write at this point, and Richard stated he was earning a living doing odd jobs. Not long after this census was taken, once again, tragedy struck this family. Paulie passed away on November 1st, 1930, at the age of only 35. Her cause of death was puerperal septicemia with acute Bright's disease. Puerperal septicemia is a multi-organ infection, or sepsis, that occurs during pregnancy, childbirth, or the postpartum period. Paulie's last child, Ralph, was born on October 10th, and she passed away only 22 days later. Bright's disease was an old-time term they used to describe a range of kidney diseases. It was usually diagnosed with high blood pressure and swelling present. So her infection more than likely caused organ dysfunction, and it had severely damaged her kidneys. Paulie's family buried her in Trail Cemetery next to her first husband, Sheridan ALSUP. This left Richard with 10 children whose ages ranged from 2 to 17, along with a 3-week-old newborn to take care of. 10 years later, on the 1940 census, Richard had moved his family back to Ozark County. He had 4 children still living at home with him, and he was farming for a living. His youngest child, Ralph, was living with his aunt, Paulie's sister, the only Workman sister left, Margaret Workman Trail. Margaret also lived in Ozark County, and she had lost her husband George earlier that year. And yes, George and Margaret are both buried in Trail Cemetery as well. Richard passed away in a nursing home in 1963 at the age of 81 due to arteriosclerosis, which is damage to the arteries. He is buried in Trail Cemetery, next to his first wife, Mary, and near Sheridan and Paulie. Paulie has a very simple stone. It's definitely not one that would have caught your eye, but the simple stone still had quite an interesting story with it. My family tree showed that I'm not related to Paulie, but I am related to her second husband, Richard Trail. He is my 7th cousin, 5 times removed. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Paulie.